something is fundamentally wrong with New York. Now, I think it's fair to say there's something fundamentally wrong with many different places in this country, but for the sake of this segment, we're talking about New York State. The other day, Governor Cuomo was threatening local businesses, literally saying you would take away their licenses because of violations of social distancing rules. At the exact same time, something like 10 or 20,000 people were marching in Brooklyn for Black Lives Matter. Now, what is this? That the governor won't call out what these people are doing. That they're going to claim there's going to be a second wave and it's the fault of these businesses. This I can understand. You see, this is them being terrified of violent riots. You get what you want when you riot, man. Hey, look, the rioters said rioting worked. They're correct. Terrorism worked for them. Congratulations. Threatening to destroy small businesses, threatening violence, apparently got the job done. Why? Because Cuomo bent the knee to terror. Well, let's talk about the absolute failures of policy. NYPD brass. We are arresting too many prisoners on early COVID release. Oh, surprise, surprise. Jonathan Martinez is one of at least 250 people released from Rikers during the coronavirus pandemic, who has since been rearrested in some cases multiple times. At this point, I can only conclude the Democratic governors in all of these states that have enforced these ridiculous policies have completely failed in every single capacity. You can't stop the protests. You can't stop the riots. In fact, they're cheering for a lot of the protesters. Some of the governors, I think in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, I believe New Jersey, actually went out and marched with the protesters. At the same time, COVID was so dangerous, they had to release convicted criminals from their jails and prisons. And guess what? I believe it's St. Louis. I could be wrong. The AG of Missouri said that every single person they had arrested for looting and rioting, guess what? Was someone who was released due to the COVID pandemic. So here we are. Businesses are completely crippled. They're still being threatened. They're still being targeted by the government, and the protests carry on as though nothing matters. How is this possible? Take a look at this story from NBC New York. Hundreds of prisoners released early from Rikers due to COVID concerns are being enabled to re-offend again and again without consequence, law enforcement leaders say. We're continuing to see people get arrested over and over and let right back out. And it really defies common sense, NYPD Commissioner Dermot Shea said in an interview with NBC New York. It's almost like they want everything to collapse and become just awful. But why? You know, I've heard a lot from conservatives that this is a plot to hurt Donald Trump because you'll damage the economy and that's bad for Trump. And then, you know, the coronavirus pandemic will lead to mail-in voting and stuff. And I've heard it all. But these are in blue cities, in blue states. I mean, think about it. People are talking about they want to get mail-in voting. Okay, well, the red states have reopened, like most of them, I guess. So why would they implement mail-in voting if they don't have to and they've reopened and everything's fine? What would happen if New York did it? The popular vote might swing, I guess, more heavily for Joe Biden, but maybe that's what they want. Maybe that's what they want. They want to see 70 million votes for Joe Biden and 65 for Trump and then say, this cannot be, the Electoral College must go, we can't have this, blah, blah, blah. Maybe, but they're destroying themselves. People are fleeing these places. It's almost like they're trying to make sure Trump wins. Now, some people have said, yeah, but if they go to the countryside, they'll vote and they'll change the shape of the Electoral College. No, it won't. They didn't change their voting registration in the past few months. A lot of these places, I believe most, won't allow you to register this close to the election. So they're going to be voting absentee for the cities they were in. Maybe next election, 2024. Maybe that's the bet. I have no idea, man. But I'll tell you what. How is Cuomo and de Blasio, how are they going to explain this to residents? Come on back to New York City, where we destroyed your business, let the criminals out, they got arrested again, and then we let them out right again. Who's going to want to come back to that? They say, of approximately 2,500 defendants sprung from Rikers early because of COVID safety planning, at least 250 have been arrested again since, according to Michael Lepetri, chief of crime control strategies for the NYPD. Chief Lepetri tells NBC New York, the NYPD did not object to releasing older defendants, nor those with underlying medical conditions. But he says the consequences of the larger scale release of prisoners are now showing up in the arrest data, with those 250 reoffenders being arrested 450 times so far during the pandemic. No. I'm sorry. As soon as they cheered for these protests, take a look at this. Amanda Presto says, we were allowed only 25% capacity at church with no singing. Today was the first time we were allowed to hold mass in person. And what is this? It's a video of what looks like tens of thousands of people in Brooklyn standing shoulder to shoulder protesting. Take a look at this one. Mark Hemingway says, little over an hour apart. From NBC News, they say rally for Black trans lives draws packed crowd to Brooklyn Museum Plaza. That's great. And then about an hour apart, President Trump plans to rally his supporters next Saturday for the first time since most of the country was shuttered by the coronavirus. Health experts are questioning that decision. How absolutely absurd for them to argue that a controlled event where Trump can actually temperature check people and tell sick people they can't come in is worse than tens of thousands of people marching shoulder to shoulder across the country with no checks. Someone gets sick. Yeah. Maybe they want COVID. Maybe they want it to spread. I have no idea, man. But these people have absolutely lost their minds. Let's read more of this. So here's what they say. Josh Romani, a co-owner of the drugstore Prime Essentials, says he felt sad when he first saw surveillance tape of a man stealing socks and putting them on inside his store on Lower Broadway on June 6th. I felt really bad that he got arrested for taking socks, food, and medicine. We should have given it to him if we would have given it to him if he asked. Romani and his business partners, Eb Khalili, said they were appalled to learn from the News 4i team that the man, identified by the NYPD as 27-year-old Jonathan Martinez, had already been rearrested 3 other times before throwing a rock through his store window that Saturday. This is shocking and disturbing. It's a bad decision by our leaders. A bad decision, you think. Martinez was released from Rikers on March 16th under plans to reduce jail population for health reasons during the pandemic, according to the Manhattan DA's office. At the time, he was facing a range of charges from petite larceny, to forcible touching, stemming from at least 6 separate incidents since November 2019. Martinez was being held for allegedly robbing the Sephora on East 86th Street. He also had a violent past. Martinez had already served a 364-day sentence for pleading guilty in 2014 to strangulation involving his girlfriend. And this is who they let out. You know what, man? Look, I've mentioned it before. There's a constitutional question about whether or not we can keep someone in a jail if we know there's a pandemic. But how can you justify the release of these criminals over and over and over again while you have completely disregarded the pandemic in reference to your ideological cause? I'm sorry, man. I don't understand. They say Danny Frost, spokesman for the Manhattan DA's office, says that while his office did sign off on some COVID-related early releases, Martinez was not one of them. So, wait. You mean to tell me this dude wasn't supposed to be released and they're just letting people go now? 7 days after his early release, Martinez was arrested for allegedly pulling a box cutter while stealing a cell phone from a passenger in a parked car. NBC New York has obtained video of the incident. Martinez was released on his own recognizance. You know what, man? New York has become a wasteland. 10% of Rikers inmates rearrested after coronavirus release. Truly incredible. Now in San Francisco, they're straight up saying they're not going to respond to non-criminal calls. The cities are on fire, man. And figuratively, like these places are falling apart. And it seems like it's by design. I guess the main issue for me and why I think this is happening is when you just bend the knee to the outrage mob, there's no rhyme or reason to what you do. So naturally, everything will just be broken and backfire on you. You've got hordes of people making demands like abolish the police, abolish the court systems, abolish prisons. And yes, the rhetoric is dejected and doesn't make sense. Some people are saying defund. We mean take all their money away. No, defund just means divert some of the funds. No, defund means completely abolish. They don't even know what they're talking about. And you've got politicians pandering to people who are saying things that have no cohesive plan. How do you go to a politician and say, we want to defund the police? And they say, I have no idea what that means, but we'll just let the prisoners out. Well, here you go, man. It really does feel, at the very least, the cities will collapse. Now, maybe, the rural areas, the countryside, the smaller towns will survive all of this. San Francisco will no longer respond to non-criminal calls. I don't know what that means anyway. What is a non-criminal call? Like someone doing something petty, I guess. I don't know. They say things like neighbor disputes, school discipline interventions, other non-criminal activities. Okay. Maybe they shouldn't have been responding to that stuff in the first place. I have no idea, but I'll tell you what. Things are being dismantled. Maybe that was the plan all along, to dismantle everything. They want you to live in, they want you to see a world that makes no sense. They want you to lose confidence in the government. Now, I'm not going to pretend like there's a grand conspiracy necessarily, but you have revolutionary figures, violent extremists that foment this kind of stuff. The people I know, when I've covered these events over the past decade, I'll tell you what, man, they really do want to see the system collapse. From the ashes of the old world, we will build a new. That's what they say. So how do you do it? One of the things that I've heard from a lot of people, and I've talked about this before, is the chaos vote. Voting for Donald Trump on purpose because they thought he would bring chaos. Well, I believe that was wrong, but they were absolutely correct that the chaos would come. And it came from the Democrats, who seemingly have no plan, and all they do is screech at the top of their lungs, Russiagate, Ukrainegate, impeachment, just over and over and over. Jussie Smollett, Covington, all the things they were wrong about. The chaos worked. I don't know if these same people will want Trump again, because in order to get chaos, you got to flip things back and forth. But now you can see how the local governments are handling things. And yes, it is absolute chaos. There's no confidence in government. The police are letting criminals out. The police aren't responding to calls. The police aren't enforcing social distancing orders on certain groups. They're telling protesters they will be released without charge. In Fort Worth, they're dropping rioting charges against some of these people, but they're telling you that your business will be permanently shuttered unless you obey. There is no rhyme or reason. Perhaps it is all on purpose. Now, do I think Andrew Cuomo is doing it on purpose? No, I think Andrew Cuomo is scared of riots. And so he will give the terrorists whatever they ask for because he's a pathetic, spineless little weasel who says, please don't hurt me. But then, because, like most schoolyard bullies who have no spine, he goes to the small businesses and says, oh, yeah, well, I know I can bully you because you won't do anything about it. And he tells the small businesses, F you. It reminds me of like this bully who gets, smacked around by his dad. He knows he can't fight back against his dad. So then he goes to the schoolyard and he takes it out on other kids who he knows he can beat up. That's what this is. The protesters will burn your city to the ground and there is nothing you can do to stop them. Therefore, they won't enforce the laws. They won't even bother. They won't try. They won't call in the National Guard. They won't call in the military. They just bend the knee. And then they come for the regular Americans. Now, Glenn Greenwald responded to this tweet from Mark Hemingway about the hypocrisy, saying, to justify this, Democrats have decided to claim being outside with masks is now safe. Would have been nice to have known that when the super awesome Grim Reaper guy was shaming people for being at deserted beaches and billions were subjected to stay-at-home orders, but here we are. Yeah. You see, they were making absurd claims. Like the ocean was aerosolizing the virus and you couldn't pay me $1 million. They arrested a guy who was paddleboarding by himself in the ocean. That wasn't supposed to be against any rules at all. They told people to go out and go for walks and exercise. The rules make no sense. They want to make sure that the law-abiding citizens are getting beaten down and punished. And these protesters and rioters, well, they can do no wrong, can they? And that's the story from The Spectator. You can't rally, we can riot. The staggering hypocrisy of the Democrats over COVID-19. Now, I want to make sure I clarify my main point in all of this. When you release prisoners from prison, rearrest them and release them again, you sow chaos. When you allow riots without calling in law enforcement, just letting people run amok, you court chaos. No, you allow chaos. When you tell these people they're allowed to protest and you ignore them while battering down small business, you are courting chaos. So the main point I'm trying to make with these stories is the complete and utter failure of these state level Democrats, these governors, these local politicians who have repeatedly encouraged their people from before the pandemic, during the pandemic, until afterwards, were encouraging their people to go out and do these things. What did Nancy Pelosi say? Come on down to Chinatown and meet all the good people. Don't worry about coronavirus. What did the health experts from New York say? Come on down, party. Come on down to Chinatown and party. And then what happened? Well, then it was an emergency. Then the hospitals were overwhelmed. Oh, no, heavens. Got to shut down all of Trump's rallies. Oh no, don't let Trump do his televised press events. Got to shut that down too. And now we're supposedly still in the midst of a pandemic. By all means, come down and protest in the tens or hundreds of thousands. Look at this photo. Protesters crowd down Hollywood Boulevard. And they have the nerve in media right now to claim that we have no idea what's causing the spike in the coronavirus. Listen, the riots were 2 weeks ago now, over the course of a week? Yeah, so the average incubation period is like 4 days. So yes, we're going to start seeing a major spike. And what did they say? Perhaps this is from Memorial Day a month ago. Because chaos. That's what's happening. It's shocking to me, to be honest, that they would try and argue that Trump would not win following this. Now, to be fair, you see these mass protests and like all these people are probably going to go out and vote for Joe Biden, I'd imagine. So maybe it is true. Maybe America is just on the verge of collapse and chaos no matter what we do. But here's the main challenge, man. These people, while I'd imagine individually are not in favor of book burnings and banning art and movies, they provide the front, the shield for the people who are ransacking the museum. I mean that quite literally. In Portland, they tore down a statue of Thomas Jefferson. And I'll talk about this stuff later today, or if you're listening to the podcast, you probably already heard it. But they literally tore down Thomas Jefferson. Guess what? Trump was right. Again. Look, I'm not saying Trump is right about everything. But in this regard, there have been many issues where Trump has been correct. He said, if they tear down these statues, who's next? Thomas Jefferson? George Washington? Yes. In Portland, they tore down Thomas Jefferson. These people protesting, they probably don't know about this. They probably don't care all that much. But I'll tell you what, man, they will absolutely turn a blind eye as they link arms and block the museum doors so that you can't get in. And they'll sing dumb songs because they're morons while people inside are ransacking everything. Now, I typically don't like to levy insults, but I got to tell you, man, when someone is burning art and banning books and banning movies, and you can't see that history has begun repeating itself. So they defend the people destroying history, saying, well, they're not really destroying history. I'm sorry, man. These people are dangerously stupid. They are. Because of these crowds, you have big businesses banning TV shows. All right, at least one episode, like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. This is the episode where they were doing a movie called Lethal Weapon 5. You're probably familiar with Lethal Weapon. And the episode was explicitly explaining why blackface was wrong. They got rid of it. Those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. There was a funny story I hear all the time. It may be true, it may be apocryphal, but it's about chimps in a research study where they put a ladder in the middle of a room. And maybe I'm getting it wrong, but this is the story as it was told to me. They put a bunch of chimps in a room. They put a ladder in the middle, and they put fruit on top of the ladder. And whenever a chimp would try and climb the ladder, they would spray them all down with a fire hose. Well, the chimps didn't like it. So whenever a chimp would go for the ladder, the other chimps would pull him off and beat him up. Like, stop, you're going to get us sprayed with the hose. Eventually, one day, they removed one of the chimps and brought in a new chimp. That new chimp didn't know anything about the fire hose of the ladder, immediately climbed up the ladder to get the fruit, but the other chimps pulled him down and beat him up. There was no fire hose at this point. The new chimp didn't understand why he was being beaten up. One by one, they removed all the chimps and replaced them with new ones. And they completely got rid of the fire hose. And if any of those chimps would try and climb the ladder, the other chimps would pull them down and beat them up. That's just a story as I've heard it. It may not be true, but the general idea is people will do things just because that's the way it's always been. And the reason I bring that up is that if they erase history, they ban shows, they ban movies, they don't allow you to talk about certain ideas. They will erase your understanding of why there are certain rules, and they just want you to mindlessly follow along, completely unaware of why these things are good or bad. That way you can't challenge them. That way they can tell you what to do, and you can do nothing about it. What's scary is we are on a really dangerous track towards authoritarianism. And as they start digitally burning books by banning them, tearing down statues, and burning art, banning art, we're getting to the point where they're going to erase our ability to understand why they're doing it, because we know from history why they did it. Now, will it happen today? Probably not. Tomorrow? Probably not. But I'll tell you this already. I'm talking to some of my friends who are like, what's wrong with tearing down Thomas Jefferson? He owned slaves. And I'm like, because the man laid the groundwork for a country in which we got rid of those slaves. And so that's what we like. We're not celebrating bad things. We're celebrating the good things. We condemn the bad things. That's the point. And we also want to remember the bad things. And it's very important we know that Thomas Jefferson owned slaves because we don't like that idea. And so you can recognize your history, why it was bad and what we like. But they're tearing these things down and they're not going to stop. And this crowd of people who are in violation of the rules are the arms linked in front of the building, stopping you from stopping the rioters who are destroying art and history. These are the people that provide cover so that when the lunatics with bats and crowbars or whatever show up to a company's headquarters and say, we better do what we're told. These people are empowered by the terrorists. Okay. I have no problem with the protests. I have no problem with the protesters. They're allowed to do it. My issue is the hypocrisy that they would flaunt their right to their ideological supremacy in the face of everything happening in this country. I have a problem with that. So while on the surface, by all means, First Amendment, the protesters opposing the lockdown, you're allowed to do the exact same thing. But they did not have the sheer numbers of this group. And it was this group that condemned the anti-lockdown protesters as being stupid. And they still do it. The ideological double standard is insane. It's absolutely insane. And I think everyone can see it, which is why it's surprising to me that they would argue that Trump would lose unless the regular Americans don't know and don't care, in which case we're in serious trouble, man. It's not about Trump. It's not about the Republicans. It's about the fact that the Democrats are wholly embracing the ideological outrage mob, the zealotry. They're allowing the terrorists to get whatever they want while they're punishing anyone who opposes them, because they're spineless and pathetic. People like Andrew Cuomo. I mean, that's got to be one of those spineless and pathetic politicians I've ever seen. And I really do mean that. I'm not saying that for emotional dig or whatever. I'm trying to the best of my ability, explain this man is on his knees begging. He is on his knees begging, and he is giving them whatever they ask for. That's not a leader. I'm sorry. Whatever, man. I'll leave it there. Stick around. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel, and I will see you all then.